the relationship between global GDP growth and oil intensity is coming down. New Delhi, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was definitely not thinking of the US president as his natural ally this morning. Donald Trump's hardline action on Tuesday to pull out of the nuclear treaty with Iran is giving Modi probably the biggest headache at a time when his government faces elections in about half a dozen key states. The southern tech hub Karnataka goes to polls on May 12. Fuel prices are already at a 3.5-year high, which has forced the government to go back on its pledge to free up fuel pricing and get state-controlled oil marketing companies to hold off another price hike. Data available on Indian Oil's website suggests oil marketing companies, OMCs, have not revised fuel prices since April 24, even as crude oil prices jumped to near 3.5-year high. Besides hurting the government's poll prospects in states, rising oil prices can also stoke inflation in the economy, dent consumer demand and unsettle the government's fiscal math. A $10 rise in oil price increases India's current account deficit (CAD) by $15 billion, or 0.6% of GDP, and fiscal deficit by 0.1% of GDP, if the spike is not absorbed in domestic fuel prices. Following Trump's decision, Brent crude futures for July series on Wednesday traded 2.5% higher at $76.73 a barrel, highest since November 2014. It does not look like crude price is going to fall below the $70 mark anytime soon, said Madan Sabnavis, chief economist at Care Ratings. Assumptions made in the union budget, or in RBI policies were worked out estimating crude prices in the $65–70 range. But now, the new normal could be at $70–75 a barrel, he told ECMarkets.com. Trump on Tuesday called it a giant fiction that a murderous regime desired only a peaceful nuclear energy program, and cited definitive proof that the Iranian promise was a lie to scuttle the nuclear deal. Sabnavis believes the immediate impact of U.S. sanctions on Iran would be felt on oil prices, as it had been assumed that the treaty would be honored. At least for a month or so, we can expect upward volatility in oil prices, he said. India is a net importer of oil with inelastic demand, and global crude oil price movement tends to have a huge bearing on macro stability and, thus, hurt economic growth prospects, said UBS. Iran, the third largest oil producer in the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, supplies more than one-fifth of India's oil requirement and recently became its biggest oil supplier, outpacing Saudi Arabia. The nation exported 38.9 million tons of crude oil to the world's second biggest oil market during April to January 2017. India's oil imports rose 1.8% in 2017 to a record 4.37 million barrels per day (BPD). Rising oil prices would swell India's import bill, widen trade deficit and may leave the government with an awkward choice between protecting fuel prices, or letting inflation to spiral up, Sabnavis said. India Oil Chairman Sanjeev Singh on Tuesday went on record, saying that the OMCs have decided to temporarily moderate prices to avoid sharp spikes and panic among consumers. A Dalal Street veteran said not hiking fuel prices ahead of state elections is a normal phenomenon. The government has not backtracked on reforms. You can expect OMCs to resume hiking fuel prices a day or two after elections, he said. Modi has a long election schedule lined up for the year culminating in the 2019 general elections. Crude oil prices had fallen sharply from $109.05 a barrel in June 2014, just a month after Modi took over, to $28 a barrel in January 2016, providing the Prime Minister with a lot of wiggle room to turn around a dormant economy and build an image as an firefighting leader. As he heads into what promises to be a tough general election in 2019, Modi can ill afford to let inflation rise or growth moderate, which can derail his key agenda of job creation. Investors are worried that the government could miss its fiscal deficit target of 3.3% of GDP for FY19. The combined fiscal situation remains stretched on the risk of populist spending ahead of the 2019 elections, farm loan waivers by some states and rising oil prices, Tanvi Gupta Jain, economist at UBS Investment Bank, said in a note. Trump move has also made RBI's June policy review a live one. Previously, at least two members at RBI's rate-setting panel had advocated hiking interest rates, an idea that may now find favor in view of the changed inflation outlook. Brokerage UBS estimates that a 10% average rise in crude oil price can increase India's consumer price inflation by 25 basis points and dent GDP growth by 30 bps per second. Should oil prices rule around $75-85 a barrel level, it could undermine India's macro fundamentals. In such a scenario, we see a risk of 3 to 6% depreciation in the rupee against the dollar and at least 50 bps per second rise in policy rate in FY19, it said. It is unlikely that the government will cut duty on fuel prices or increase subsidy, as policymakers would like to assume it to be a temporary shock. The government will wait for 2 months or so hoping for crude prices to fall below $70 a barrel, Sabnavis said. You may see some trouble for 2-3 months, but I don't see crude prices rising beyond 2018, said G. Chockalingam, founder at Mumbai-based equity investment firm Economics. Relationship between global GDP growth and oil intensity is coming down. In India, industry accounts for only 19% of the economy and services 65%. Even China is moving to more consumer-led growth. The U.S. is entirely a consumer-driven economy, he pointed out. Wind and solar power capacities are coming up in a big way, steadily lowering dependence on crude. The U.S. is reported to have deployed oil rigs at record levels and its production is already close to Saudi Arabia. Beyond $70-75 barrel, there would deflationary signs which may pull down crude oil prices. I expect crude prices to drop in 2 to 3 months. Chockalingam said. PM Modi praises Dev Gautam Modi and MP on Panchayati Raj Day. Modi launches Ayushman Bharat Yojana. PM Modi will show Nirav Modi his right place. Ramdev Narendra Modi plans 3 surprise gifts for Nepal.